Thank you all for being here. You ready to get going? I'm coming right after you.
No, Josh, let's slow down.
Yeah, all right.
This is too fast.
As we look ahead...
I thought Bloomberg was supposed to move fast.
We're moving,
right?
We're moving fast. We've already written articles in the last month quoting Rohit and Steve, so I feel like I'm up to speed, and now I want to get you guys up to speed too. Looking ahead to this new Trump era, I wanted to start off by asking you both about an idea that was written up in The Atlantic yesterday that I think has big implications for what tech and antitrust policy might look like in the years ahead. The article suggested there's been a fusion on the right between MAGA nationalists like Steve and big tech barons like Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and Mark Andreessen, all in opposition to this specter of wokeness that people on the right are so worked up about. But the article goes on to suggest that big tech is actually the one in the driver's seat, and that folks like Steve are, and I'm quoting the article here, political suckerfish riding a whale. My question for you, Steve, is this true? Are you in the MAGA crowd beholden to big tech, or does Elon Musk's humiliation in Wisconsin last night begin to weaken his political standing and his influence on policy in the Trump presidency?
Are you assuming that someone spends $20 million and goes wear a cheese head on a stage and bounces around and is humiliated? Okay, the whole fusion crap is pushed by the tech oligarchs. You know why? They fear populism. They fear economic nationalism. If we admit we're in a coalition, it is a coalition, but there's a much higher probability that we will have fusion with certain of the ideas of Rohit, and particularly Lina Khan and others that have fought, monopolies, have fought oligarchs for years, and I think that's where the fusion is going to come. One of the biggest scourges in our country are these oligarchs, the lords of easy money on Wall Street, the corporatists, and particularly the apartheid state of Silicon Valley. And it's a huge problem. And yes, we're in a very uneasy coalition, but it is a coalition. They were, some of them, quite central to our victory in November, and they were also central to our, let's say, there was a huge defeat last night in the Supreme Court race in Wisconsin.
So my question then is
Is that, you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you look at the first Trump term, at the Federal Trade Commission, for example, every single time you really saw the Republicans on the FTC speaking from a different hymn book than Trump. They were pro-Chinese manufacturing, they were pro-big tech, they were pro-big pharma, and then you saw others who were really trying to fight against a lot of that money. And now we think Silicon Valley used to be lots and lots of little tech, and is it going to stay that way, or is it just going to be owned by these 6 dudes? And Zuckerberg can, wear whatever chains he wants. But I think at the end of the day, if they control this whole system, there's big trouble for our country.
You're not going to bro out. You're not going to start going to UFC fights No, the fusionism is pushed by. We're in a coalition. The fusionism, they want us to be subservient to their interests in techno-feudalism, and we're not going to do that. The power we still have here, and the difference in the first term, we've now evolved this party to be truly a working class and middle class party. And the Democrats have kind of lost that or lost focus on it. They become the credential class. And we need to drive this point home. That's why we're building a bigger coalition. And I think if we do our job, and somehow we can keep them together in an uneasy coalition, although I don't know if that's possible, we can we can redefine politics like in 1932. We're at that inflection point that is upon us to do it. And things like last night, obviously, are a big setback.
Looking ahead at the policy landscape, though, if Elon and the 6 bros are representing big tech, who, if anyone, is standing up for little tech in the Trump administration?
I think you've got a lot of people. I mean, I think we've got one of our new FTC commissioners are here. Mark's here. You got our viceroy. Where's Mike Davis? The fire breather Mike Davis is a fire breather for the populist side. If you look in the Justice Department, right? Tomorrow I'm going to be over there at Justice with Omid and others, Gail Slater. I mean, look, I think Lena Khan is one of the most important political figures in this country. And I think if she had been listened to more by Democrats, they would have actually been more competitive against us in November of 2024. But I think you have a lot of people that I would call neo-Brandeisians that actually see the danger of concentration, of massive concentration of personal wealth and power to government power. And look, let's be blunt. That was all caused by the Democrat and most progressive elements of the Democratic Party. The bailouts on Wall Street in 2008, which were unacceptable, and the kind of Faustian bargain given to the big six dudes to essentially say, you're going to have monopolistic power, but we'll make a deal with you. You have to be at the cutting edge of that because we're a hegemon. You have to have the commanding heights of technology. TikTok shows you they've blown it in social media. And quite frankly, DeepSeek, whether it's a Chinese psyop or if it's real, shows you that their method, right, which they threw climate change overboard, all that overboard for this mass power of AI is wrong. And now, what do they want? They want a bailout. They want a $500 billion Mercury program or Marshall Plan, however they call it, and they want us to turn the national labs over to them. Absolutely. Right? So these guys, they have an unsatiable appetite for money and power. And it's got to be stopped.
And they want to hand over a playbook that is really Europe's playbook from the 40s about trying to have a clique of corporate royalty that we're supposed to help the entire time. And I thought America built all of this because we made sure there was little companies challenging these big guys and running them out of business when they're doing something better. So I think this is the jump ball right now. We see it in a few different places, but if they hollow out and defund some of these enforcers, they're not going to be able to go up against.
Let me ask you about that, because you've been
Are we taking this over? Are you going to get some
more
into this?
No. I want to spice this up a little bit, because you sound like you're half asleep. Rohit, you were recently on the receiving end of the Trump-Musk policy approach, and so I'm imagining your view of Trump's approach is a little less rosy when it comes to big tech than maybe Steve's is. You told me at the time for a Bloomberg post I wrote, quote, defunding the police that watch over Wall Street and big tech will cost consumers billions of dollars. What's the case you'd make to folks like Steve and Republicans on the right for why a robust enforcement regime is necessary?
Well, look, Steve mentioned the bailouts. I think a lot of what our discourse is today, whether we know it or not, comes from the financial crisis and the big giveaways to those who are already powerful. In what planet can you mismanage your business so badly and go on the other side and become bigger and more powerful? That's exactly what happened in 2008. So I really think, look, it is a jump ball in so many places. When Musk and whoever took over the CFPB, one of the first people they fired were the tech people, the ones who were doing the investigations of big tech companies creating currency. They were the ones who were trying to make sure there was open tech so that small companies could challenge big banks. So we're going to see a fight on both sides, I think. But I don't know how it's going to turn out if they keep getting rid of the watchdogs and just expect these agencies to be lapdogs.
Okay, so I want to dig in a little bit more on this idea of a struggle between big tech and little tech, how it might play out in the Trump years. And I want to provoke you both a bit by offering some historical context. Richard Nixon famously wanted his Justice Department to threaten investigations of the major TV networks in order to obtain friendlier coverage, perhaps a precursor to Trump's later threats against big tech. On the Nixon tapes, we hear him saying a DOJ investigation, quote, gives us one hell of a club, a sword of Damocles, Nixon called it, to coerce favorable coverage. Steve, is that Trump's real aim here, just a friendlier Facebook and a defanged Washington Post? Or are there real populist instincts that might lean against the power of some of the big tech companies?
I think, look, it's obviously something that's being worked out through the Trump administration. Like I said, we're a coalition. There's definitely voices on big tech. They have every lobbyist in this town, every law firm in this town. Let's say it's a rigged system. The system's totally rigged. If you want to go up against big tech now, I'm going to tell you how tough.
But you've talked to him personally about this.
Here's what I think is. Here's one of the things I think is important is our going after the big law firms. We're trying to go after the machinery that has this system set up to go after the big law firms. I think we have to go after the big investment banks, the big hedge funds, the money center banks. You have to go after all of them, and basically, play smash mouth because they play smash mouth with you. This system is run by money and power. It's run by oligarchic centers in both Wall Street, the corporatists, and Silicon Valley. And we're just not going to change it overnight, and there is a struggle. I mean, I would submit to you that, and if you read the front 2 pages of the remedy section in the Google case and see where our Justice Department is coming out, it kind of stuns me of how antitrust the people we've put in. I mean, people know I'm a big admirer of Alina Khan. I don't think we've made that big a shift. I would love to have her back. I think she'd be terrific, but we're just a difference in degree, not so much in kind, of what we put in place today. And I think you're going to see tough antitrust action taking place. That's why I think Wall Street's not enamored. They didn't see the big wave of M&A and M&A fees coming. So this is all, but it's always going to be a struggle. And it's who's going to be able to have muscle politically. In Florida 6, we were down 3 points. I think up to 2 weeks ago, when our show got involved, Breitbart got involved, we got our grassroots volunteers out. Scott Jennings on CNN makes a very important point about as we've reshaped this party to be more working class and middle class, we also are dependent upon low propensity voters. Low propensity, low information. And they're not degreed or not dumb by low information, they're just not interested in politics, right? These people basically come after Trump. We have to have a massive grassroots effort every time to get them out. Scott's absolutely correct, and this is one of the reasons we won in Florida 6 is got it out. So the power, we have to, what they call them, suckerfish?
Yeah.
We have to deliver, mass amounts of grassroots, right, who are basically entrepreneurs, right, the little guy, the little shopkeepers, the workers. We have to deliver that, and we have to deliver it consistently. But I think you're starting to see that we did win. Shouldn't be lost here. We did win overwhelmingly the voter ID in Wisconsin last night. Although we lost. I think we got blown out.
I mean, since I've known you, you've been really outspoken. You just mentioned it now about the power of money in politics, and I'm interested in how that applies to tech and antitrust policy. What is there evidence you can point me to that Trump is serious about pursuing a crackdown he's talked about in the past,
yes,
and won't be bought off by inauguration checks
look at the
from
FTC.
Zuckerberg and Bezos?
It's
a Melania documentary.
We're
on
in
Amazon.
an imperial capital that the populist nationalist movement did not create. Okay, this is an empire. Exactly what the revolutionary generation and the framers and the founders of our nation warned us against. We evolved into. If the revolutionary generation of framers came back to say they'd spit on the floor with how we've allowed this country to evolve. And so our movement is relatively young and having political power. But look at our Justice Department. Look at some of the commissioners we're putting on there. These people are almost as big of fire breathers as Rohit and Alina Khan. That's what I think is so shocking.
Is the personnel the real focus that you see?
Personnel's policy in this town, right? Particularly working it. Go back and read, look at what we're doing at Google, both in the courts in Northern Virginia and in DC. You should definitely want to read the summary that the folks wrote. It's quite powerful, and I think it shows you the beginning of a framework of what I would call a populist nationalist idea about antitrust and about taking on these oligarchs.
Let me ask you, people don't think of you as this necessarily, but you were actually, in a manner of speaking, a two-time Trump official because you served in the Trump FTC, and you had a long and glorious, 7-day run as director of CFPB?
13.
13. Yeah. Oh, that's more than a Scaramucci. So you in all seriousness. You've had, it seems to me, a variety of experiences with Trump and his policy impulses when it comes to antitrust and other things. I remember you were at FTC when they first went after Facebook. You did some cracking down on companies that had abused the Made in America label, I remember, that Republicans were against. But I believe Trump spoke out in favor of that. So you've seen all sides of the man. I mean, how serious do you think he is about pursuing an agenda that would really police big tech and stand up for little tech companies, a lot of whom don't think they really have a voice?
Well, I'm not his therapist or psychoanalyst, but I guess I'd say this. When you actually look at the people that were put on the Federal Trade Commission in 2018, most of them were voting with big pharma, big tech, those guys. Over time, you saw some shifts. We ended up voting out the Facebook complaint, 2 Democrats, 1 Republican, against 2 very pro-monopoly Republicans. So we'll see how it plays out. There are some warning signs. I have no idea why they would fire the 2 federal trade commissioners.
Is that a
it's
positive
like you don't
moment
even,
when you fire the Democrats from the...
Well, it's also like, why fire them? They're the ones who are also on board with going after some of this concentrated power, standing up for little companies, for little pharmacists, for little grocers, and the list goes on and on. I don't know what that was about, but I think this is now the question. Are we going to see a repeat of 2018, or is Steve going to be right that there's going to be some big changes?
See, I think that's an evolution of our party. I think we're getting more populist and more nationalist. Look, in 2016, we came out of nowhere to win. We've had it in those 4 years at interregnum, President Trump, and you see the relationships he built and who he's put in. People should understand, I am banned on every platform. I'm banned in perpetuity on Facebook, on YouTube. Twitter, Spotify. I can go through I'm banned. The show is the #1 or #2 podcast in the country, essentially. You know, if you look at Pod Save America, we're generally in back of them. I'm banned everywhere. I was debanked after January, after President Trump went back to Mar-a-Lago. All my banks fired me. All my law firms fired me. I had big name law firms, all fired me. All my credit cards were canceled. I went to federal prison, right? I've seen the power of the state. And you know what I say to them? Go fuck yourself, right? We're going to, because you have to. Otherwise, they're out to crush you. Don't think I'm any different than any of you guys. You raise your head up against the apparatus, and they're going to do the exact same thing to you. This is why I think there's much more commonality. The potential fusion I think we do have is much deeper behind the scenes and much deeper as we get back to actually what is populism, what is economic nationalism, how do you defend the little guy, how do you defend the entrepreneur, how do we get back to our entrepreneurial roots as a country, right? And it's a struggle, and we're not going to agree on everything culturally, we're not going to agree on everything politically, but when I look at the battlefield, I feel pretty good. I feel that there's a natural reaction to the Facebooks and to the Silicon Valley crowd and to the Wall Street crowd. So I think there's a great future for populism, how we define it, and economic nationalism.
Let's broaden the aperture a little bit beyond the U.S. Steve, you've been quite active in supporting populist right-wing causes, not just here, but across the globe and in Europe. Trump has 2 supporting populist politicians. In December, when he nominated Gail Slater, he said, quote, "Big tech has run wild for years, stifling competition in our most innovative sector." I think he posted that on Truth Social. Given that Europe is grappling with many of the same policy issues in regard to big tech, do you support and should Trump support the EU's efforts to crack down on big players like Apple and Google in an effort to open up markets overseas?
I do agree with trying to stop these people anywhere we can, because I think they've gotten too much power. I would like to see, instead of, you have 75 electric vehicle companies, but you have 1 search company, right? We should have 100 search companies. We should have, Facebook, we should have 100 alternatives. The only thing that holds me back about the Europeans is that there's no more corrupt system than the EU and what they do, right? These are still it's still the monarchists, it's still the aristocracy, right? That most of our families, many generations ago came away from. This is why I so detest the established order in Europe. And I'm a big supporter of kind of these right-wing populist nationalists, which each one's different, right? And each one's got its own characteristics, as it should, in these countries. But we have a long fight over there. Look, it shouldn't be lost on anybody. They try to put Trump in prison for 300 years. Bolsonaro's on trial for his life. They're going to find him guilty in the show trial, and they'll put him in a prison. He's going to be assassinated, or they're going to attempt to assassinate him. And Le Pen, he's up by 20 points in the poll, and they're putting Le Pen now has a 4-year a prison sentence and can't run for re-election. That may all be worked out, but that is what this kind of judicial, what I call insurrection, is coming against the populist right, and we have to just power through it.
I don't think we should outsource anything to Europe. But I will say this, when they've been doing all their committees after their laws, the people who are actually going and using that process to challenge big gatekeepers from squelching them out are a lot of little American companies, because they want access to that market too. So I don't know, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do our own work here. We should not allow, Facebook's Libra currency scheme to come back again. We should not have these new types of dollars that big tech companies control and can wall everyone out of. We should be passing laws and doing work here in Washington in every single state. And there are so many issues where I think there's a lot of agreement. Child and teen privacy and exploitation of them, counterfeit goods and labeling. I mean, the list goes on, and the big tech companies have fought every single step of the way, and we should fight against that.
Okay. It's Liberation Day. I'm sure you all have heard. I'd love to get a preview from Steve, but what I really want to ask you about is, can the U.S. and Europe effectively regulate tech companies at the same time that they're waging a trade war? Or will Trump wind up inadvertently helping big tech in an effort to jam the EU?
I think they're kind of two separate things. I think today, and I think in the Rose Garden at 4 o'clock we're going to find out, I'm not so sure a decision's been made. I mean, I'm for reciprocity, and I realize there's some legal issues with that, because I want to expose to the world how we've been taken advantage of by the political class in the United States, the globalists on Wall Street, with these trade relationships with people that we pay for their defense, that have hosed us for decade after decade after decade, and that all rolls down to the little guy. So I'm for reciprocity, and tough reciprocity. I don't think that may happen. I think there may be some tiered of 20% or some tiered system, which will be fine, and they'll use the emergency measures to implement that. But I think we have to think about and focus on bringing high value added manufacturing jobs back here to the United States, and not assembly jobs. The guys at Ford bitch and moan all the time, well, we manufacture all this and we're going to lose $1 billion. No, you don't. You assemble. We need to bring high value added manufacturing jobs back here to the United States of America. People say, well, we're manufacturing more than ever, and there's 400,000 unpaid. No, we assemble. We need to manufacture here. We need to rebuild the greatness of our industrial base, and we can do it. At the same time, we have to break up tech and give more access to capital entrepreneurs. We can do all that. This is none of this. The Republicans, when I first got into the politics here with Andrew Breitbart 12, 14 years ago, this kind of Austrian school of economics and all this, it was like they thought it was a natural property. They thought this was like the second law of thermodynamics. It's not. It's all human agency. We've proven this in this populist movement and getting people engaged and involved, the little guy who's engaged and involved now in politics. So we can do this, and we can build a system that's closer to the American plan that Alexander Hamilton and the great founders of our country set up in the 19th century, that we can recreate here and become an economic superpower again, a true economic superpower based upon people, not that what in the last 6 months, the top 1% have accreted another $4.5 trillion of wealth to themselves, more than gone to the bottom 50%. We have a capitalist system, or quote-unquote capitalist system, with no capitalist. And that's what we have to change. And we can change. All of this can be done. Don't think we have to take down the system. And to do that, you have to be relentless. You have to be prepared to be banned, to be debanked, to be shut out, and to go to prison. If you're not prepared to do that, you're not prepared to take on the system and win.
We're getting back to the question of Europe. Is Trump willing to let the EU crack down on American companies like Google, like Apple, or will he dig in his heels and want to retaliate?
I don't think it's going to be retaliation against that. I think it's going to be retaliation against manufacturing and the German car companies and all that.
So you don't think that bleeds over into tech policy?
To a degree, but I don't think it'll be the driver.
We'll see also the big ticket item is on China.
Yeah.
So right now you have a lot of the largest tech giants saying, you need to listen to us and favor us to compete with China. I think if anyone gets distracted by that argument, we are in trouble.
But here's the horrible thing of that argument. Their failure in being given the Faustian pact of allowing them to become oligarchs, they failed in social media. Clearly they're not as good. And they failed in AI. They want a bailout, at least $500 billion, and the national labs to be turned over to them. They also put the gun to your head and say, hey, you can't regulate us now because you need national champions because the Chinese Communist Party has a fleet around Taiwan. That's a struggle we're going to have to go through, and we cannot agree to that. We can't agree to a bailout. We can't agree to turning the national labs over to them, the weapons labs for AI, and we certainly can't genuflect, as you're so rightly pointing out, about the issue with the Chinese Communist Party.
Rohit, Democrats have been despondent by the results of the November election. With the exception of last night's victory in Wisconsin, it's been a pretty rough ride. A number of folks I talked to do see glimmers of hope on the antitrust front with the nomination of Gail Slater, other folks we've talked about. What are your thoughts? And Steve talked a lot about this idea of a populist cross-party alliance. What are your thoughts on that? How realistic do you think it is as you look ahead at the landscape over the next couple of years? And as somebody who's worked under Trump, who's clashed with Elon, who thinks a lot about the policy issues at the heart of all this, are you hopeful? Are you despondent?
Well,
how should people think about this?
I mean, look, I'm happy that some of them are using the policy ideas developed by Lina Khan and others who really came and started and lit a match on all of this. And if that is leading others to change good, I just want to go back to, I still think it comes down to, you saw anger across the board after the Wall Street bailouts. Occupy Wall Street, Tea Party, the whole thing. Most people, yesterday in Congress, every single Republican except 9 of them voted to raise overdraft fees for people. There is maybe going to be agreement on certain places, but right now, those big oligarchs and big corporate royalty are still calling the shots in Washington.
Do you disagree with that?
No, they own this city. If you try to go for them legally, you can't get a law firm because they hire the law firms. They have all the lobbyists. They have tremendous power in Capitol Hill. That's why our movement is in its very early stages. And with President Trump at the top of the ticket, we can win national elections. As it proved last night, since we have low propensity voters, we built those low propensity voters, I'm the first to admit we have a tough time otherwise, and we have to build an apparatus that can do that. But it's going to come from, I think it was only one in the Senate, Josh Hawley, I think is the only person that voted, only Republican. So we have a ton of work to do. I'm not sure so many of the elected officials in the House or the Senate are populist economic nationalists. We're still run in a neoliberal, neocon mentality. But I believe, and if you look at Stoller, you look at yourself, Lina Khan, I believe, since I would posit the Democratic Party and the official apparatus of it abandoned you guys who had some great ideas that we as populist nationalists are getting a whole team to hopefully implement at least some of them, that there's much more. That fusion, to me, is more important than the fusion with the big tech bros. But we have to deal with political reality as we have it right now. But our party is only going to become more working class and more middle class. And I think that'll tend to the fusion.
Our time is ticking down, but Trump also got rid of populists like Rohit. So Rohit, Steve's talked a lot about the positive idea of an alliance, but just as a last question, what's the worst case scenario for you? What do you stay up at night worrying about? Note that we only have 90 seconds.
Well, to me, I'm not crying and despondent. All of us are working on how we figure out how to reclaim power and to actually make sure that this economy is working. And I think that we'll see if anyone in this administration will do it. I'm going to be watching on big mergers like Capital One Discover. I'm going to be watching, like Steve is saying, the Google case, Facebook case. There's some places where I'm going to be watching really closely to see. But I really hope that this is the status quo is so broken, and just we need to move and turn the page.
You know, Jake Sherman said yesterday, because I've been a huge proponent of this tax extension of the taxes, that given where we are with cuts that have to be made or just not going to be made, given the financial situation of having to refinance all this debt and what the burden is putting on working class and middle class people, that I don't see any scenario that we can extend the tax cuts for the upper bracket. It can't happen. And Jay Sherman went around yesterday, and I love Jake Sherman. I think he's fantastic. He said he couldn't find one representative in the Republican side.
They laughed at the idea.
They laughed at the idea. Chip Roy came on War Room this morning and absolutely agreed with me and says behind the scenes there are a lot of people. The litmus test for me early on, besides all the great work the guys at the Justice Department are doing on Google and other things like that and the FTC, is this tax situation. If the wealthy are not prepared to help us get control of spending, particularly defense spending, and actually align defense spending with our hemispheric defense that President Trump has laid out, the defense budget has to be cut. And I say this as a guy that spent 8 years as a naval officer. My daughter went to West Point. I'm not a dove. The defense budget's out of control. It has to be cut, right, before you touch anything else. And we have to raise taxes. We cannot extend the tax cuts for the wealthy. Their taxes have to increase.
All right. On that note, let's wrap it up. Thank you both. Thank you guys for listening.